Apologize for the delay. Council went a little lengthy today. We had the Speaker of the State Assembly with us, and there was plenty of commentary in the council. So we had to announce that this committee would be heard instead of 2 o'clock, it would be 10 minutes after the adjournment of council. Council adjourned at about 2:20, and so therefore we will commence the Information Technology and Government Affairs Committee will now come to order. We have 4 items on the agenda, and then we'll go to a special item. And so first, we'll start by announcing that recommendation of the chair. We anticipate having a quorum in just a few minutes. The recommendation from the chair would be to take items 2 and 3 on consent. So for those of you who are here on items 2 and 3, you're welcome to stay, but very likely we will be taking those items on consent. At this moment in time, I do not have any public comment cards on item 2 and 3. So that would be the recommendation for 2 and 3. Therefore, we will go now to item number 1.
On item 1, the Chief Legislative Analyst is reporting relative to the 2011 State Legislative Program, and this is a verbal type of report.
Okay. Thank you very much. The staff present to present on item 1. Anybody here? Oh, okay. Well, we're waiting for the staff. We will go to item number 4. We'll hold item number 1 and go to item number 4.
A motion has been introduced by Council Members Garcetti and Reyes relative to the possible purchase of city-owned Department of Transportation, lot number 676. This is for the purchase at fair market value by the current occupant, El Centro del Pueblo, and other related actions.
Okay. Is there anybody here from General Services or El Pueblo? Not General Services? Oh, okay, sure. You want to run point on this?
Bernice Hollins, Office of the CAO, representing the interest of the Proposition K program. El Centro del Pueblo is required to provide services defined in the Prop K grant agreement until November 2nd, 2018. Prior to reporting back to this committee, staff will prepare the necessary report to the LA for Kids Steering Committee that oversees the program, either at its March 31st or April 28th meeting. That action will be to amend the Proposition K grant agreement as needed to reflect the new ownership status. This report would enable staff to report back within the 60 days as per the instructions of the motion.
Okay. So with that, we don't have any public comment cards on this item, so we'll continue with discussion. Public comment card, if anybody wants to make comment on item number 4, please fill out a card. So with that, what we have is El Centro has expressed their interest in purchasing of the property. So what are the next steps?
It's twofold. Like I said, there will be actions on the Prop K side dealing with the agreement, the service requirements, but there will also be coordination with GSD and transportation to prepare the necessary sales agreement.
Okay. So that would involve the city attorney's office preparing that agreement?
It would be city attorney and GSD.
Okay. All right. So what this committee will do at this time, if we were to instruct you to report back in 60 days, which of those elements do you feel could be completed within that time?
I can definitely commit to addressing all of the Prop K grant agreements. I couldn't make the commitment for GSD and city attorney. However, there is city attorney representative here.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Council Member Dorna Saglas from the Department of Transportation. As far as the Department of Transportation is concerned, we are in agreement for the sale of the property. As far as with regards to part of the agreement is that they have the option to purchase, and we will work with the General Services to do the fair market value analysis and then work with the city attorney for the PSA.
Okay. Thank you very much. So with GSD not having the representative available, I'll ask them to apprise my office if 60 days to report back as instructed by this committee. If that's not enough time, then they'll have to let me know. Otherwise, within 60 days, we expect to report back, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward on this item. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, public comment on item 4 was open, and it is now closed. So at this time, we'll hold item 4 in committee, awaiting a quorum. What we have next is we will move to the special agenda, as we have the author of the motion on the special agenda with us today, and having the time of 2:20 having passed, we can go to the special agenda. So with that,
Item 5 is a motion by Council Members Corretz, Labange, Smith, relative to restricting the sale and use of bath salts containing synthetic drug known as MDPV, which are being used as legal alternatives to cocaine and meth.
okay. Councilmember Corretz, would you like to come forward and educate us on the importance of this motion and how it's affecting the young people, or how they're unfortunately affecting themselves with this material?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to present my motion today. And also here to give their takes on the issue is Captain Bill Hart from LAPD's Vice and Narcotics Division, and Jeff Henderson from the Phoenix House. A lot of people don't know yet how dangerous Ivory Snow, Cloud 9, or Vanilla Sky can be. But these are the names of synthetic drugs that seemingly every news outlet in the country is talking about, referred on the streets to by the innocuous term of bath salts. A Google search will turn up headlines like DEA names bath salts a drug of concern, Governor outlaws bath salts, asks DEA to investigate, DEA finds dangerous stimulants marketed as bath salts. According to the Washington Post, officials fear bath salts becoming the next big drug menace, and the New York Times warns that bath salts are powerful synthetic stimulants designed to be comparable to cocaine or methamphetamine and with similar risks. There's one important way that these are different and from cocaine and meth and other drugs, which is that bath salts are legal in most of the United States and can be bought and sold, including by teenagers at convenience stores, and are relatively inexpensive. In fact, these bath salts are being used as legal alternatives to cocaine and meth, and they're also incredibly versatile. Users can snort it, smoke it, eat it, and the drug can be injected as well. And a recent statement put out by the President's Office of National Drug Control Policy indicates that the emerging threat of these stimulants is serious and calls for the marketing and sales of bath salts to be halted as unacceptable and dangerous. And indeed, the DEA has expressed concern regarding these drugs, which reportedly cause panic attacks, an intense high, euphoria, extreme energy, hallucinations, psychosis, insomnia, and cause users to be easily provoked to significant anger. And as we all know, numbers don't lie. Poison control centers from across the country are reporting greater numbers of calls relating to bath salts. There were 236 calls all of last year, and in 2 months of this year alone, there have been more than that number. And while there's a national cry for federal legislation to regulate these synthetic stimulants, the feds aren't acting enough, so there's a lot of local action already taking place. Louisiana, North Dakota, and Florida have issued emergency bans on bath salts. The legislatures of Hawaii, Michigan, Louisiana, Kentucky, and Mississippi, as well as a number of county, city, and local municipalities, are already considering bans of these drugs. And some have criticized me for proposing such a ban, but the horrifying number of recent incidents occurring in the past few months across the country show the necessity of instituting such a ban, including a case where a Mississippi man, high on bath salts, slashed his face and stomach repeatedly with his own skinning knife. According to Mark Ryan, the director of the Louisiana Poison Control Center, if you take the worst of some of the other drugs, LSD and ecstasy, with the hallucinogenic, delusional type properties, PCP with its extreme agitation, superhuman strength, and combativeness, as well as the stimulant properties of cocaine and meth, if you take all the worst of those and put them all together, that is what you get. It's ugly. Judging from reports coming from around the country, we have to treat this as a public health issue as well as a public safety issue to make sure the city doesn't have this turn into an epidemic here. Adopting an appropriate ordinance will allow the council to provide suitable public safety response while also educating people about the emerging menace these drugs represent. And I'd like to have Bill Hart and Jeff Henderson also speak to this issue.
Also, if you could address, it's my understanding, as this motion is written, it would not affect the industry of bath products. It's just a particular chemical that's used in a particular type of bath product, correct?
Right. We're not trying to, address Epsom salts and the typical bath salts that my grandparents used. I mean, this is really the designer drugs that are currently causing the problems throughout the country.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Councilman. My name is Bill Hart. I'm a captain with LAPD. I'm the commanding officer of Gang and Narcotics Division. And when I was asked to appear today by a member of Councilman Corrett's staff, I explained that I'm not an expert on bath salts, nor do I think we really have an expert within LAPD, because fortunately we haven't seen this problem here in the city. However, in January, I was fortunate to go to Washington, D.C. and attend the National Narcotic Officers Association Coalition. It was a several-day event in D.C., and part of the one of the presentations there was put on by DEA officials, and it dealt with bath salts. And I can tell you that this is an area of significant and growing concern across the country. These substances do pose a serious threat to health, and as Councilman Corrett said, they're accessible, they're legal. 12-year-olds could walk in and buy these off the street. Right now, the problem is most acute in the southeastern United States. I believe the councilman said Louisiana, Mississippi, Kentucky, Florida. However, there's been documented cases of exposure in at least 25 states, including California. And as you pointed out, these are not Epsom salts. They're not the bath salts that you actually put in your bath. They're designer drugs that are labeled as bath salt or sometimes as plant food or even research chemicals, but they're actually synthetic stimulants that mimic the effects of cocaine and methamphetamine. But in addition to the euphoria that some people feel from cocaine and methamphetamine, these can cause chest pain, increased blood pressure, rapid heartbeat, agitation, hallucinations, delusions, and extreme paranoia. In December of 2010, a Mississippi deputy sheriff was killed by a man believed to be under the influence of these bath salts. I think Councilman Corretz mentioned another Mississippi man who slashed his own throat, or slashed his face and his stomach. He survived, and he actually admitted to being a long-time drug user, had used every drug from heroin to crack cocaine, and he said that these bath salts caused him the most terrifying hallucinations he had ever had. He actually wrote into a local newspaper and advised people not to take bath salts. And I also came across a story of another 21-year-old in Louisiana who slashed his own throat, missed the critical arteries, but was so determined to kill himself that he then shot himself and did die. As discussed, these are sold legally in smoke shops, convenience stores, and over the internet. In fact, there are internet sites where users can actually post their reviews of their experiences with these different types of bath salts. We're not certain where they come from. I believe that some are shipped here from Europe. The councilman mentioned the names that they're marketed under, these soothing names like Ivory Wave, Purple Wave, Vanilla Sky, Bliss. They're labeled as not for human consumption, which is a loophole that has allowed them to avoid being regulated and or specifically designated as illegal. They can be snorted, mixed with food or drink, injected, smoked. They cost about $20, maybe $20 to $35, depending on what type you purchase, and they're really accessible to almost anyone who has the money to buy them. Ideally, there will be some federal legislation that will designate these as a Schedule I drug, which means that they have no medicinal value, but they do have a high potential for abuse. Obviously, local bans are not as effective as a federal ban because users can simply cross jurisdictional lines. However, getting something banned federally is a lengthy process that could take years. And meanwhile, several states like Hawaii, Florida, Michigan, Kentucky, North Dakota, and many municipalities have introduced legislation to ban these products, and there is some evidence of success. In Louisiana, in the last 3 months of 2010, there were 125 calls to the state's Poison Control Center. But after they adopted an emergency order that banned or outlawed bath salts, calls to the Poison Control Center dropped sharply in January. So I would like to support Councilman Corrett's motion. We don't really have resources within the police department to focus on this issue. However, I think there would be benefits in the education portion of this. It's very possible that some of the store owners who are selling these products don't understand how the danger.
Okay.
And I think the education and publicity that would come along with this would help parents to talk to their children about the dangers and to learn to spot the risk factors and behaviors that might indicate that their kids are using them.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Councilmember Koretz, for being so proactive and making sure that we lead on this issue rather than be reactive. Obviously, as confirmed by our own police department, perhaps it's not a major issue that's been identified here in the city of Los Angeles, but it certainly is an issue that has been talked about by the federal authorities and also by various jurisdictions that have been tremendously affected by it. It just hasn't arrived in Los Angeles in a big way yet. So I think it's important that we do be proactive. Again, your motion, Mr. Koretz, basically asks that the city attorney prepare an ordinance to outlaw and or restrict the sale and use of these drugs in the city of Los Angeles, but it also urges Washington, D.C., i.e. the federal legislators and also the state legislators in Sacramento to also do the same, for them to look into this and see how they could also make those restrictions at both the federal and state level as well. So I just want to thank you for that and also appreciate the testimony. We do have a quorum, having Councilmember Zine has arrived. Councilmember Zine, we're on special item number 5, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, just one warning, Mr. Koretz, you may want to let Councilmember Wesson know that of the dangers. Apparently his favorite thing to do is to relax in a bubble bath, so you might want to give him the heads up. You better check the labels.
I don't think
on
he
it.
uses these particular bath salts.
I'd like to know how you know that, sir.
Councilmember Wesson has mentioned it various times on the microphone in committee and in council, so there. Go ahead, you're up.
The methadone is one of the drugs. I'd just like you to pronounce the second one.
You're asking beyond my...
Well, I know it's MDPV, abbreviated, but does anyone know how to pronounce that long drug?
I tried to sound it out.
You did? Okay.
Ethylene dioxypyrovalerone.
All right.
What he said.
No, I looked at that, and that's obviously some scientist came up with a long word to trick everyone. No, I obviously support that.
Okay.
So move to...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilmember Koretz.
If you're willing to take an extra moment, we have Jeff Henderson here from the Phoenix House who wanted to testify
Oh, yes,
as well.
please.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting Phoenix House to this important topic. I'm Jeff Henderson, the Senior Director here at Phoenix House in California. We oversee many programs here, as well as 3 that are in Los Angeles County. Just for my own, give a little bit of background, I've begun to become educated on this issue about 6 months ago. My activities, I'm a very social media kind of person. I get into Twitter and blogging and Facebooking and so forth, and my outreach to clientele that are into the substance abuse or addiction lifestyle. And in that, I started noticing that more and more media attention was being brought to the bath salt issue. So I immediately started contacting all the people that were kind of mentioned previously in these news articles to find out what was going on in their community so that I can begin to educate myself and then in turn educate our own community about these issues. I then published my own blog entry on this to educate our local communities on this, and was recently in an article in the Orange County Register on this issue as well. Bless you. Some main points, though, I would like to address, and I think that are relevant in this. The bath salt issue has begun to show these fatal consequences in various states and jurisdictions, and I think that Los Angeles's preemptive steps can be viewed as a responsible public health response. Phoenix South supports all efforts that are protective in nature. That being said, we also need to recognize that drug suppression and control efforts represent a singular approach in public health that is best applied in a very multifaceted manner. This body may be limited in its authority to compel other needed components of a comprehensive plan, but I would highly recommend any efforts that would support community prevention through education, early intervention, and treatments, impacting the demand of the drug markets in total. So in other words, looking at the demand side of this as well as the control side of this as well. We can begin to see some of the patterns of a lot of newly introduced substances in the last several years. If you want to include methamphetamine in that group, going back a little ways, but also most recently the growing use of spice, salvia, and of course the Four Loko type drinks that are being heard about in the media as well. Given those past developments and how those substances are introduced into our commonplace, it's just a matter of time before we begin to see these kinds of increases here in Los Angeles. Some of those factors are involved are ease of availability, manufacturing, level of perceived danger or benefit to the users, and of course the word-of-mouth experience is similar to the websites that allow you to give your own personal testimony, which I found quite interesting to read how people express themselves about what their effects were. And just for my own edification, I'm also a former teen drug user and found recovery at an early age of 15. And I can personally attest that having substances easily available to me when I was in that lifestyle made it much more convenient for me to experiment with substances, increasing my risk of actual harm or fatal consequences. Kind of skip ahead here. But I just want to make sure that we're hearing the point here that we run the risk of losing the most important factor in our discussion, which is that substance abuse disorder is not and should not be kept viewed as a correctional and law enforcement issue primarily. It's a public health issue. So yes, I believe it's a responsible step for us to support this measure, and at the same time we also need to look at this issue from a broader public health perspective as well.
Okay, thank you. And for those people who don't understand what Phoenix House is about helping people get clean, stay clean, and move away from a lifestyle of being drug dependent. And beyond that, I'm just simplifying it. I'm simplifying
Thank you.
it. Sorry about that.
Yes, Phoenix House is a national nonprofit agency, the country's largest nonprofit provider of substance abuse disorder services. We operate in 12 different states, and we have about 20 programs here in California, 3 of which are in Los Angeles.
And then you focus mainly on teens, right?
We serve both teens, adults, in custody, outpatient programs, community-based programs, the whole range of continuum of services.
But as far my understanding of Phoenix House is that you've worked comprehensively with teens more than any other organization I've ever been aware of. But I don't know.
We're one of the largest provider. Well, I think we are still the largest provider of teen substance abuse services in California. Yes.
Okay. Badly needed. Thank you very much.
Just to add that additional action, the motion does not specifically address support federal legislation sponsored by Senator Schumer or sponsor legislation in Sacramento to ban this. We need to make sure that that's
Other
included.
specific legislation introduced already?
Well, apparently,
It
federal
speaks to
legislation
it generically, that the motion does support that federal and state.
to support both federal and
Yeah.
state? Okay.
Correct. It doesn't give a particular bill number. I'm not aware, I don't know if you're aware, Mr. Correct, if there's any bill numbers that address this issue yet.
I know there were some plans in the works. I'm not sure if we actually have.
Or whatever's in the works
bills
we
that
want to
have been
support.
addressed.
Absolutely.
If we find out that between now and when it comes to council, we'll add in the specific wording.
Okay. There's mention in your motion, Sacramento, Washington will restrict the sale of these new designer drugs. In the interim, however, it's critical that we do something. So while we're going to do something, and I guess our lobbyists can watch from Sacramento, Washington, to make sure that they support whatever takes hold. But it's got Senator Schumer's name here on the federal legislation. It doesn't have an author for Sacramento, but whatever is going forward, we obviously want to support.
We'll check into it. If there are bills, we'll have that language added into.
Because obviously the local ordinance only protects Los Angeles.
Yeah.
They can go to West Hollywood or Inglewood or any other neighboring community.
We're hoping, as has happened so many times with legislation, that
Hopefully
it's
we'll
difficult
see
to
some crime.
pass nationally.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you pass it locally, it provides the momentum to get
And
it
you
done.
look at the title, bath salts. You know, a
Sounds
real.
pretty innocent.
It does, very innocent, like, bath salt. So what's bath salt going to cause? Obviously, you look into it, they find a name that doesn't really draw attention.
Well, I think that was the hope, to sort of fly under the radar as long as possible.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll have public comment opportunity. I don't see any public comment cards at this time, so public comment is now closed. So with that, we'll move to adopt the motion. Okay, it's been adopted on a 2-0 vote. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Corretz.
Mr. Zion?
Earlier, we took up 2,
2 and 3.
3, and 4.
2, 3, and 4.
We had a brief discussion on 4, nothing.
Support those.
Okay, so at this time, we'll take up a vote on items 2, 3, and 4. And those were all reports.
Unanimous support.
Okay. So,
For the record and clarification, for item 4, do you wish to continue the item in committee, or do you want to send it forward?
in committee.
In committee,
Continue
thank
the
you.
item in committee. Yes, on item 4. Thank you for that clarification. Okay. So with that, we now move to item number 1.
1.
Okay.
This is a verbal report from the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to the 2011 State Legislative Program.
Good afternoon, John Wickham with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. We've just poured through the 2,000 or 3,000 bills that were introduced.
Is that all, 2,000 or 3,000?
Just 2,000 or
I thought
3,000.
they were limiting bills now.
Yeah, you know, somebody didn't get that message. So there are quite a number of bills that relate to issues associated with the things we learned about City of Bell, different types of audits that legislators are trying to assert on cities, and a number of other things related to Brown Act issues and such that we're looking at, the city attorney's office is looking at. As usual, there are a lot of bills related to energy issues. And what we've done is reviewed those bills, and we've passed them out to the departments, and we've asked the departments to take a look at them and get back to us with anything that might be of issue or concern. We also have resources in Sacramento who are looking at the bills as well and referring bills for us to look at. So between all of our resources, we're able to, I think, get a good sense of what's going on and what bills we need to pay attention to. The main issue on everybody's mind, of course, is the budget, and specifically redevelopment and the actions that are going on there. The Senate passed the governor's proposal to eliminate redevelopment. The Assembly did not pass that specifically. They passed an action to recognize $1.7 billion from redevelopment in the state budget, but did not go so far as to eliminate redevelopment. And what that did was sent the whole issue to a conference committee, and there are hearings going on now to try and reconcile the two positions. There have been efforts to identify alternatives to eliminating redevelopment, and we're monitoring those. The alternatives have not received a lot of support in Sacramento yet, but people are trying to find some way to preserve redevelopment and also allow the state and the schools to receive the funding that's necessary there. So we're watching it. The language that was released by the Department of Finance to effectuate the elimination of redevelopment is terrible, frankly. It's a huge, huge concern, and we will have a report coming forward to you soon. Basically, if they create this governmental structure to transfer the authority to basically liquidate the assets and obligations of the agency, and they create a situation where if the city stepped in to take that responsibility, we would have absolutely no decision-making authority, and we would have absolutely no control over the finances and the money, but we would have all of the liability. And all of that liability would basically fall back on the general fund. And so this is a huge concern with the structure of this bill right now. So we're taking a look at that, and we will be bringing forward some detailed discussion with the assistance of the city attorney and the CRA at a later date.
Okay. One of the things that I would like to point out, I think it's important, especially when the legislature is acting and the governor is proposing, that I think it's important for us to constantly prove that we're trying to do what we can locally to make sure that we're efficient, that we're actually keeping down our costs wherever and however we can. The last thing we want to do is be accused by the legislature or the governor that we're being wasteful and we don't deserve the money that we actually do have in our, not only in our general fund and special funds. So I think it's important for us to understand that there's a budget crisis at the state level. We understand that. Hopefully they will. I'm sure they're not going to hold us harmless, but I'm sure they're going to affect us in more ways than one. But I think at every opportunity we need to prove as well that we're actually keeping the dollars down at our local level. And one of the ways in which we've done that is we've actually started to look at our own phone usage, cell phone usage within the city family. For example, the governor made a part of his announcement, even though it was in the billions of dollars, one of the things that got a tremendous amount of attention was the fact that they need to look at large and small portions of their usage. And one of them was that perhaps they could save tens of millions of dollars at the state level when it came to getting a handle on what's their phone usage at the state level, what state workers and agencies, et cetera, and what can they do to curtail those costs. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that we've started to do that here in the city of Los Angeles. And the Information Technology Department, along with GSD, have been working with the CLA and the CAO to make sure that we're actually looking at that. And the numbers that I've seen, I hope Sacramento's listening, is 2 budget cycles ago, we were spending about $6.3 million on phone usage in the city. And in this current budget year that we're in right now, the 9-10 budget year, we actually reduced it down to $4.7 million. And it's my understanding that based on the information that's going to come forth very, very shortly, we perhaps, as the cell phone goes off, we can perhaps be looking at another $1 million in savings based on renegotiating our contracts, reevaluating how many phones we do need per department, et cetera. How do you feel? What do you have an opinion about how you feel about whether or not that does or does not help us when we're communicating with, for example, the legislature and the governor, when they're talking about such deep cuts in our direction, the fact that we're actually cutting locally?
Absolutely. It's part of every discussion to show that we've made the efforts to, we're making the efforts to reform in lots of different areas, that we're holding ourselves accountable, and that we understand the issues that are in front of them. So, yeah, it's every effort.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is important is some people don't understand the magnitude of difference when it comes to our budgeting issues and their budgeting issues. For example, here, when we're looking at cutting usage of cell phone usage, just using one example, especially since the governor made an example of that at his level, we're looking at possibly curtailing another $1 million off of our expenditures in one budget cycle. Yet, when you look at the state budget usage, that's tens of millions of dollars. So when we're talking about looking at ways to save $1 million or $10 million or even $50 million, they're looking at saving $100 million, $500 million, $1 billion. And they have a budget issue that's in the magnitude of tens of billions of dollars that they have to address. And they're trying to address that as we speak. So I just want to make sure that people understand that we have to monitor how legislation at the federal and state level affect us not only when it comes to budgeting issues, but policy matters. But at the same time, I think it's important to have the same discussion about how we're doing what we can locally, and that we should not be easily attacked because rhetoric flies easily. And in those hearings that I've been in, when I was in the legislature, I remember that one time a senator from San Diego was berating our Department of Water and Power. Regardless of how you feel about the Department of Water and Power or what have you, I happened to sit on that committee, and it was unwarranted. And he was accusing the Department of Water and Power of gouging the state when it came to how much we were charging on the energy that they were buying from the Department of Water and Power during the energy crisis that we all recall, about 10 years ago. But what happened was, when he finally allowed them to speak, they were able to prove to the senator and to our committee that the prices that we were charging were warranted, and they showed us exactly where they got that pricing. So it wasn't gouging, it was well within the purview of the department to charge what they did, and they charged exactly what they were allowed to charge. But during the rhetoric portion of that meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, the senator was really going after the LA Department of Water and Power, and when they got a chance to speak, we realized that it was unwarranted. So I think it's important for us to not only monitor legislation, but also keep in mind and allow them to understand what we're doing locally to make sure that we're doing the best job we can to make sure that we're cutting back wherever we can on our budget as well. Is there anybody from ITA here? Yes. Could you let us know what it looks like when it comes to that matter that I just brought up when it comes to our phones usage?
So this is Kevin Crawford from ITA. ITA is currently negotiating with all four cell vendors on costs specifically around this. We're looking at it more from a not shutting off the cell phone, making it more cost effective so that it's better for the city. So for instance, in our department alone, we've moved 100 people from pagers, which were costing us $10 a month, to a no-cost cell phone, which allowed us then to talk to staff directly, which made them more functional for them at a much reduced cost. My case, for instance, when we started this process, I was on a BlackBerry. My entire plan, both data and cell, was $99.99 a month, and my current plan with T-Mobile is $4.25 for the cell phone and $16.50
Wow.
for the data, which is about a...
That's over 70% savings.
Right.
What kind of service do you compare the service?
I have-
What you had in T-Mobile?
Absolutely. I've compared the service. I went through Verizon. I actually tested a Verizon phone in there too. And T-Mobile had one dead spot on my train ride from here to Winnetka, and which was better than the AT&T. AT&T had dead spots all along the rail line.
How about Verizon? Where they have a dead spot, other than right here? in Civic
Verizon
Center?
actually had coverage continually across. And Verizon we're working with also. They have a zero-cost phone. The difference for them, though, is that T-Mobile is giving us 400 text messages for free, whereas Verizon is not. So that $4 is paying for 400 text messages, which for us, trying to get information back and forth, hey, I need you to go look at this piece of equipment now, and so on and so forth, works very, very well.
So we're not looking at only allowing city staff at all levels to only have one phone carrier, for communication carrier. Basically, what we're looking at is getting the best deal possible across all the potential carriers that are approved by the city for usage. So therefore, maybe a police officer can use a particular, the police department can favor a particular plan based on their type of use, where your department, ITA, can favor a particular plan based on your type of use, and overall, we're maximizing the savings, correct?
Absolutely. The other thing that we're doing with the cell companies is, rather than trying to keep up with their cell rates and everything else, which they're much more familiar than we ever will be, we have asked, and all of them have agreed in principle, though we don't have contracts in place for all five, that they will do quarterly reviews for us to tell us, it doesn't appear that these people are on the right plan, you're paying too much money, or you're not using the minutes you're paying for.
That'll save a lot of money.
Yeah. So bottom line, once again, you know, if we focus on the thousands of dollars per department, we're actually going to be saving millions in the long run. And this is going forward. Once we've addressed this issue, when you look back over 3 or 4 years, we will have saved several $1 million over that period of time, hopefully upwards of $1 million a year, and hopefully getting better than that. So I just wanted to make sure that we took the opportunity to give a tangible example, not only to Sacramento, but to ourselves. I want to thank the ITA department, GSD, and everybody else who's been involved in this particular example, that we are being proactive. We're not waiting for some newspaper article to accuse us of being wasteful, et cetera. We are, in fact, being proactive. So thank you very, very much for that example. Okay. All right. So another thing, when it comes to monitoring legislation, I spoke to the speaker today. He was in chambers, so I didn't want to miss the opportunity to ask him about the CRA matter, the redevelopment authority issue, and apparently they are looking to take it up soon, but it doesn't appear that they're going to be taking it up on the floor this week at all. It doesn't give us much time, so we still have a lot of work to do, so keep your eyes and ears open, because like they say, as long as the legislature's in session, watch yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I cleaned up the traditional thing. So with that, do we have any public comment on this item, item number 1?
No.
Okay, seeing and hearing no public comment on item number 1. With that, thank you for the verbal report on item number 1. No action required on item number 1. Is there anybody here for general public comment to this committee?
No.
Seeing and hearing no one come forward for general public comment, general public comment is now closed. That means this committee is now adjourned.
Kevin, Laura, thank you.